Thank you, Eric. Beautiful. Who of us has not felt far from home? Who of us has not felt moments of being blue? Who of us has not wanted to find our way back? These stories of healing that we have been talking about during this season of Lent are things that we can all relate to. We have all had moments when we are longing for that return home. So I just want to remind us of the idea behind this series, the idea of healing, the idea behind those pieces of beach glass, which comes from a third creation story from the Jewish tradition. And that is this idea that as God was creating, there were vessels of not God, and within those vessels of not God, God placed divine light. And those vessels of not God could not hold the light, and so they shattered. And in the Jewish tradition, what we are all to do with this idea of tikkun olam is to gather up those pieces of light, those pieces of shards, and come together once more. It's represented here in our vessel here, filled with beach glass, filled with light. And so we've looked at our physical healing. We looked at what does community health look like. And today we're talking about our mental health. As the worship team was coming together to discern what should these Lenten series be, I remember saying, I don't think I've ever spoken about mental health, which is kind of curious even for me. So we're going to start with Scripture, as we've been doing. And this is, again, coming from the Gospel of Matthew. It is the last of the healing stories within the Gospels of Matthew in chapters 8 and 9. And so here we have, as Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying loudly, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe I am able to do this?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." And then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their eyes were opened. And then Jesus sternly ordered them, "See that no one knows of this." But they went away and spread the news about him throughout that district. After they had gone away, a demoniac who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who had been made mute spoke. And the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." From the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9. Now, one of the things that I need to tell you to kind of put this particular scene in context is that before this happens, right before this in that 9th chapter, Jesus calls Matthew as one of his disciples. And he enters into Matthew's home, and he's there having dinner, we're told in scriptures, with many tax collectors and sinners who came to eat with him and his disciples. And the Pharisees saw this. Now, you'll remember Jesus and the Pharisees had an interesting relationship. They kept trying to catch him being outside of the law, and he kept showing up as his divine Christ-like, calling them out for their hypocrisy. And this one was no different, because when the Pharisees saw this, they questioned the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus, hearing this, said, "Go and learn what this means," he says. "I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners." And it's that one piece. Think on this. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, that I want us to focus on for a moment, because that comes from Hebrew scriptures and from the prophet Hosea. And in the 6th chapter, in the 6th verse of Hosea, we read where God, through the prophet, says, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." I desire mercy, not sacrifice. In other words, the law was about the sacrifice. The prophets and Jesus are inviting us to set aside that law and to step into the fulfillment of the law by centering within that divine Christ, God, and extending mercy. And I share that with you because within this scripture that we're looking at this week, what the two blind men begin with is they come to Jesus following behind him. Imagine Jesus walking through the crowds, right? And here are these two blind men following behind him. Lord, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us, we're told, that they called after him. And it wasn't until Jesus entered the home and they found their way into that home calling for mercy that Jesus finally responded to them. Do you believe that I can do this? He asked. And with their yes, we believe, he touched their eyes and they were healed. So I've been thinking about this idea of mercy this week. You know, what is this that we call mercy? The traditional way that we have to look at it is actually a little bit more recent. I think it was from the Old French that meant to pity. When we think about extending mercy to someone, we oftentimes are in this place of feeling sorry for them, seeing their suffering, and so we pity them, right? And we extend our mercy then to them. But the original Latin that was translated as mercy is actually said to be reward, which I think is a little bit different than pity. So I imagine Jesus there in that moment looking at these ones calling for mercy and not pitying them, asking them, do you believe? And in their statement of, yes, I believe, they were able to receive that reward of healing in that moment. How many times we get into the place of judgment rather than mercy. And when we can go to the place of mercy, then our eyes can be opened to the truth in that moment, to seeing each one from that place of the divinity that they are. Of course, the story goes on to tell us about the demoniac and Jesus, healing the demon. And I think that this is a really important healing story for this particular week in which we are talking about mental health. Because you see, in the history of humanity, in the history of religion, there has been a time where mental health issues were seen as somebody had a demon within them that needed to be healed, that needed to be cast out. And while we have, as humanity, moved beyond that idea, in so many ways, we still hold those with mental illness at a distance. To the point where those who suffer with mental illness are oftentimes feeling like they can't share their story, like that mute within that healing. They have no voice to their story. How will I be judged by this? How will I be seen as less than by this? Physical health, those things that we can see when there is disease, it's much easier to be in that place of mercy and compassion. But when you cannot see it, it appears to be much harder. And when it is mental health, it has just become something that we don't talk about. We don't let someone know when we're feeling depressed, when we're feeling anxious. I wanted to share some statistics with you this morning because what I know for sure is that mental health affects each and every one of us, and that we need to be able to share it out with one another, that it's important for us to tell our stories. And we need to tell our stories. The CDC tells us, this is heartbreaking, that from 2007 to 2018, there was a 60% increase in suicide between young people ages 10 to 24. 60% increase. Suicide is in the top leading causes of death. It's 10th overall. 10th overall. For ages 10 through 34, it's the second cause of death. For ages 35 to 54, it's the fourth cause of death. It is 2.5 times more likely that someone will die by suicide than by homicide. Some of you may recall a Sunday service a few years back after I got back from a Unity convention in which Sharif Abdullah was talking about the suicide rate in our country, bringing our attention to it. And what I asked people here was, if you or someone you know has ever attempted suicide, considered suicide, or committed suicide, stand. And over 90% of this congregation stood. And yet we don't talk about it. It becomes this thing that we don't share, that we don't speak about. 13.2% of adults in the United States use an antidepressant. This is from the National Health and Nutrition Survey, and the use of antidepressants increase with age. 25.1% of children ages 13 to 18 experience anxiety. It's been estimated that during this past year, when there has been so much challenge with us with this pandemic, that the anxiety rate for adults ages 18 to 24 has increased to 56%. We have a history in this country of not taking care of those with mental illness. There was a time in this country where mental illness hospitals, right? Mental hospitals were built. And that's where they got sent. But there was a lot of abuse within those mental hospitals. And rather than dealing with the issues and the challenges, what we did was shut down those mental hospitals. And now they're out. People with mental illness are totally not getting support at all now. Rather than dealing with the challenge, coming up with meeting one another with mercy, with grace, we cast them out. Their stories are not heard. It's estimated that 45% of all homeless people suffer from a mental illness. And it's not just the homeless. There's a higher percentage of suicide, depression, anxiety among those of our family who are LGBTQ. 40% of individuals, when they come out to their family as being LGBTQ, experience rejection. 86% of youth who are LGBTQ are rejected, harassed, bullied by their classmates. There's a lot, so much to consider here. But I know what it begins with is an acknowledgement that we experience mental health challenges, that we begin to speak out if we are feeling depressed, sad, anxious, that we feel that we can reach out to one another within community, within our families, to share the challenges that we are moving through, and to not judge one another for this. We may not believe it's demons anymore, but we certainly hold our judgments about what it is. Years ago, in the spiritual community that I was leading, there was an individual there who experienced mental health challenges, severe mental health challenges. And would be in and out of the hospital, and I would go to visit them as they were in the hospital and then out of the hospital. And at one point, they asked if they could talk with me, and they talked about how they did not feel that they could be themselves or feel accepted within Unity, because when they would share their feelings with their Unity brothers and sisters, they were told, you need to change your thinking. You just need to be more positive. And this person dealing with this mental illness, which, by the way, is the result of chemical compounds within our brain. It's not a matter of thinking your way out of it. After years of moving in and out of that place of being in hospital and then out of hospital, finally decided there was only one way out, and that was to commit suicide. This person had young children, a young family. And from their perspective, the best way that they could take care of their family was to remove themselves from the cycle that they and their family had been caught in. And in their mind, the most loving thing they could do was to simply take their life. Who am I to judge or argue that understanding that they came from, even as I think, oh, if we could only have met them more fully, more completely in their story and where they are, how could we have supported them? I wanted to share something about that from Reverend Kelly Isola, who has a blog, and she's written about her own walk through depression and anxiety. And this is what Kelly Isola says. There's an interesting paradox inherent in that continuous flow of life energy. It always brings us to places where we must risk being open, being touched, being vulnerable. If we do not allow this cord to breathe us, we can never be changed by our experience. We won't be anointed by the beauty and the suffering that is necessary to participate in our world, a world that invites us into a gritty and mysterious territory called our humanness, which is where we experience our divinity. Hence the paradox. So one of the questions that has once again risen in my mind around suicide is wanting to understand how we, as living, breathing, talking, walking portions of divinity, can rejoice in the mystery of being human when touched in such painful ways. And when I say rejoice, I'm not talking about finding a silver lining or affirming away from my pain with the idea that there must be a blessing in here somewhere, but rather sitting with the idea, the awareness, that in every moment of being broken open, in every breakable thing around me, including the life of a beloved, there remains and will always remain the unnameable and an unknowable thing that is forever unbreakable. Now, that's where our mercy lies. In that understanding that in this moment I may feel totally lost, disconnected, out of sorts, in chaos, sad, depressed, anxious. That there is a way that I can allow these spiritual ideas, teachings, practices, awareness of God to support me through it. It's not about, just become more positive so your depression will go away. It's, here is this depression. What is available to me that I can sit and breathe with and allow to strengthen me, to uplift me, to support me once more? Because there is within each one of us that unbreakable peace of spirit. That unbreakable, divine Christ consciousness That in that moment that I am broken open, I know you've experienced it where you have said, God, I cannot do this anymore. I need your help. Support me. Help. There is that grace that then comes in that strengthens and uplifts you in that moment so that you can breathe into the next moment and breathe into the next moment and breathe through whatever the experience is. And if we could get to the place where we could be honest with one another, where we could share the stories with one another of how we are feeling with being real and authentic with one another, and if we who hear those stories and feel the discomfort of that and want to fix it, if we could simply hold that sacred container for the feelings to be, to just listen, and to extend our mercy by seeing that one as they are in truth, not broken, but whole and holy, not with platitudes of just think better, but of mercy. Let me hold you in this loving place of acceptance right here, right now, where you are, without needing you to be different. And what would that be like if not only did we do this for one another, but we did it for ourselves? I know this has been a tough year. I know that as we look at the statistics from this past year, we will likely see that people received more medication for anxiety, for depression, that suicide rates went up, that people have felt a variety of things over this past year. I get it. But what I want you to know is it's nothing new. It didn't suddenly show up in this last year. It's been here. But like everything else COVID-related, it's magnified it and focused it so that we can finally acknowledge it. You're not bad if you feel sad. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel anxious. It's a part of the human conditioning. It's a part of the chemical compounds in your brain. And all that I'm asking any of us to do is to realize and recognize that we have within us that Spirit of God that is open to us and supporting us in walking through the sadness, in walking through the anxiety, in walking through the depression, in walking through the grace. So let's see how we're going to practice that this week. The words of Jesus that we heard this week in the healing story were, "Do you believe I am able to do this? Do you believe the Christ within you is able to strengthen you, to uplift you, to inspire you, to give you understanding, to support you in this moment? Do you believe I am able to do this?" And so in that question, we're invited into our own belief in transformation, to step into a new vision, a renewed vision of our lives, to speak into a new story, to not be bound by the stories of the past inscribed on us by others that may be oppressing or limiting us, to ask for a new way to see the struggles you may be experiencing. And that new way may be that we accept them rather than resist them. Ask for understanding and a way forward. And then what is one step you can take each day that will support your mental health, no matter what is occurring around you? And I'm going to remind us once more of the practice of those contemplative practices that we've been talking about, and how those contemplative practices can bring us into this moment without judgment, simply allowing it to be what it is. Sit with your Zen garden, put your stone in from this week, your beach glass from this week, and affirm for yourself that you will focus on your mental health this week into a place of acceptance, into a place of loving acceptance. And then contemplate, what does that mean for me this week? I look forward to hearing from you. If you'd like to share your healing stories, I am looking for people to do a little video, 1 to 2 minutes during this Lenten season, of how you are being resurrected in your healing. And you can find a link on our live stream page and on our Sunday service page where you can let me know that you'd like to share that healing story with me. So thank you for that. And then finally, before I'm done today, I want to tell you, I know some of you come and listen to me and then venture off of our live stream, but I'm going to invite you today to stick around. Because right after our service today, the Board of Trustees and myself have a very important community-wide announcement that we'd like for you to stay on and hear. And then after that announcement, we will meet in the community Zoom room for questions and discussions. So hang on till the end of service today, friends. Thank you, and God bless.